Everyone, welcome back to the workshop. One of the questions that people often ask me is, what is the best laser for me to get? And my response is usually it depends. And it depends a lot on what type of material you're wanting to work with. Well, today we're going to look at a laser that maybe is going to flatten that equation a little bit, and that is the ComMarker Omni 1. This is a 5-watt UV galvo style laser. And the cool thing about this laser is that it tends to interact with most materials, both from your organics to your metallics to your synthetics, whereas in the past we've had to deal with multiple lasers to be able to kind of cover that spectrum of materials. So we will kind of briefly go over the specifications of this laser, giving you an idea of its size and what comes with it, and then we're going to jump into some material tests so you can see what this laser can do. So if that is something of interest to you, you want to learn more, stay tuned. I am going to jump right into it. All right, so we are going to jump right to the machine itself. I didn't film the build. The manual kind of walks you through it. It's pretty straightforward. You really pull all your parts out. You got to attach the tower to the base. There's 4 screws. It goes in the corner. It uses the bigger screws. Then you got to mount your laser module to kind of the lifting mechanism of that tower. You will need to kind of figure out, there's a few different slots. It seems like a couple different positions you can mount that in, get that centered, put those 4 bolts in there. And then there's some cables to hook up, and they're all kind of different sizes. So you can't really screw it up. There are multiple ones. One comes up to the laser head here, a couple go on the back of the module, and then they come down to out of the base. And then there's one more that kind of wraps around, and this is the power cable going from kind of the base power module to the tower, which allows for the electronic lifting mechanism. So like I said, there are a few other people that have maybe covered the build. It is fairly straightforward, so we're gonna just jump right into the rest of the laser. So as I mentioned, this is a UV laser. That means it's in the 355 nanometer wavelength, which is a lower wavelength than a lot of our diode lasers and our IR lasers, and of course our CO2s. They kind of go up from there. And that wavelength allows it to interact with more materials. So that is kind of the cool feature of this laser. It also gives it an effect that they kind of consider a cold burn. And that means it's not going to be sintering. It's not going to be heating up the material as much. You're not going to get as much scorching, that your metals aren't going to warp. And so as we get into the materials a little bit later, that's what we will be looking for. Now, what comes in this package is the laser itself. We talked about the parts that kind of assemble the machine itself, but you also have some additional accessories. You're going to have this kind of neon looking paddle, and what this is for is to allow you to see the framing laser. It has a red dot, a couple of red dot lasers here for focusing, but as far as the galvo, the UV laser does not show up on as many items. So it will show up on this. You'll hit your framing function, set this down on top of your material, and it will kind of show up that outline of where your engrave, your cut's going to happen. So that's what this is for. They also include a nice steel ruler here, and this is in metric. And for that is if you want to manually focus. Now on the side of the head here is a sticker that shows the focal length for this laser, the tested focal length. For mine, it's 324 millimeters, and it is to measure from this line. So it's not from the bottom of the sticker, top of the sticker. You'll see that there's measure from the line. So you can set this on here and bring your head up and down, either with the buttons down on bottom or the hand crank on top, and allow that to focus. Once you have that set, you can also double check your red dot alignment or your red dot focus laser. They will kind of be separate until it hits that point where it's, in my case, 324 millimeters off the surface, and they will come together. There are a couple set screws in here that if it's off, you can loosen those up and kind of manually adjust these. So it's best to check with the ruler first to get it set to the height, and then set your focus dots to make sure they align. Now, this laser does come with 2 different lenses. One I have on here and the one I use most of the time is a 150 millimeter lens, but they also have a 70 millimeter lens. The 70 millimeter lens is going to give you a little more detail, but it's going to reduce your working area of this laser. Now with that 70 millimeter lens, it also has a shorter focal length, and that's why they include this little lifting table. You can set this down on here and it will help you bring your items into focus. They also include a foot pedal. This can plug into the back of the machine, and so if you have repeated jobs that you want to run the same thing, or maybe do a sequential number on there through Lightburn, you can plug this into the back, and then every time you hit the paddle, it is going to run the job again. Just kind of as a easy way to hit repeat on the laser. It does come with a little USB drive. This is going to have EasyCAD software on there, as well as the config files for that. If you're using Lightburn like I prefer, you can also use the config and correction files on here to get it set up as you import that into Lightburn. So also included as a standard USB cable, and then they do include a couple of USB 3 to USB-C adapters. So in case your computer is slightly different, doesn't have the older style connectors, you can still get connected. There's also going to be a corner bracket. This is kind of an alignment tool you can use on here. They have a number of, a whole grid of kind of threaded insert spots on here that you can move that around or create your own jigs from, so that's very nice. They also include some sample material. There's some felt pieces, some paper, some wood, and then there's kind of a bag of miscellaneous items like your anodized aluminum business cards, rings, some dog tags and such. So a nice little set of material to get you started. And then of course there is the user manual. Like I mentioned, this does walk you through both building or assembling the laser, as well as just getting both EasyCAD and Lightburn set up. So good thing to reference here. Most of the things I found here would be very accurate, easy to follow along. So like I mentioned, we're gonna kind of skip over the actual build and jump into the rest of it. Taking a closer look at the laser, here you see up front we have our emergency stop button. So that's something to check. If anything's ever going wrong, you push that in, it's going to kill power to the entire laser, but then you need to twist it to release that. We of course have our power button, and then we have our lifting and lowering buttons here on the front. Now this one is unique. In addition to the main laser power, we also have a laser module power button up here. So if we turn the laser on, this will turn the whole unit on, but we also need to push this button in and it'll flash for a while. It takes about a minute to warm up the module. Once that turns green, then you are good to go to use your laser. Coming around to the back side, we can see our other connections here. Of course, we've got our standard power cord. Looks like there's going to be an enclosure that would maybe have a safety switch on it. You have the option to add a rotary. Of course, we have our foot pedal and then our data cable coming from our computer. And then this wire down here is the power cable that comes up to the side to power the tower so we can get our lifting focus. And of course, we have our data cables and such coming from the power supply and such up into the laser source up here. Got a couple connections up here, and then of course one on the back of the head. So those are all very easy to connect. They just plug in one way, tighten down the holding screws, and you're good to go. Now we should talk a little bit about the size of the laser. If you're familiar with other fiber lasers, such as the ComMarker B4 here, you'll see it here. This is much bigger. The base of it is probably about twice the size. It's a little bit wider and definitely deeper. And it's got a good 6 inches of height on here, as well as just this tower is much beefier and such. So it's gonna take up a little space. It's not impossible to move. I think it's roughly 45, 50 pounds overall. So you can move this, but you're gonna probably wanna have a fairly stationary spot for this. You could probably take it to a show, but of course you're really gonna wanna make sure you get some sort of enclosure for it. But real quickly, let's grab actual dimensions of this. So just the frame and buttons itself, we've got about 24 inches, but you have some wiring in back that sticks out a little bit further. So you're really probably looking at about 32 inches of space that you're gonna want between at least a wall and the front of this. Your feet, of course, though, they're gonna fit on they are just about 23 inches from inside to outside, or from outside to outside. So as far as the surface, you can set it on 24-inch depth is gonna do well for you. Side to side, we have about 13 and a half, 13 and 3/4 inches. So that isn't too terrible. And then for height, of course, we're looking at about 28 inches tall. So like I say, it's a little bit bigger than your typical fiber, your smaller fiber lasers that you're looking at. The base is definitely a little bit bigger, takes up a little more space. So just something to consider if you're looking at this one, trying to figure out if you have space in your shop, there's some basic dimensions for you. Let's take a look at the results that I did get testing a variety of materials. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that my kind of standard material is 3mm Baltic birch. I use that in a lot of my lasers. Since this one can work with organics, went ahead and did some testing with that. So of course, mostly we are going to be doing some engraving. And as you can probably see on this, I started out and was getting almost nothing. And this was just, again, playing around with the frequency and the Q pulse to really try to dial in where it was going to interact the best. And so it took till my third test here to where I was getting a somewhat decent gradient. And on this one, I was running my speeds from 100 to 500 millimeters a second, the frequency from 35 to 45, and then the Q pulse was set at 5 nanoseconds. So we did get a pretty good gradient. I probably should play around a little bit more, both with the frequency and the Q pulse to really dial this in, but I was kind of happy with the gradient I was getting here that I could do some engraving tests. As you can see, you can definitely get something that's very dark on up to just very faint markings. So that'll be good both in the aspect of raster engraving with images where you're going to need that wide spectrum to various vector engravings. But not only can it engrave, it can cut certain materials. And so I ran a cut test on another sheet here. Here I started my speed from 50, went up to 100, and then the frequency was set at 30 kilohertz. That's about as aggressive as you can get in a 1 nanosecond for the Q pulse. And then I was adjusting the number of passes. So I went from 1 on up to 10. And you can kind of see down in this lower quadrant, we were just starting to get through there at a speed of 50 to 55 and 8 to 10 passes. So for this material, 3mm Baltic birch, it's going to need to be run at a speed of 50 millimeters a second and 8 to 10 passes with that 30 kilohertz and 1 nanosecond of the Q pulse. The cool thing then is that we were able to then engrave and cut out my logo, and it came out very clean. The nice thing about this being a cold burning laser is that I have done nothing to this. I did not sand it. I did not clean it up. Both front and back are very clean. There's really no vaporization. So that there you see the front is very clean, the back is very clean, and that edge is just lightly tanned. And just for comparison's sake, here is the cut edge freshly off a diode laser compared to that UV laser, and you just see how clean that cut is. Now, another material I've played around with that I sometimes cut is EVA foam. Now, the problem I've had with other lasers is that it does kind of melt and leave a bit of a sooty cut. I was able to cut, this is 6mm EVA foam, and I was able to put an engraving on there, so you can kind of see that's a nice little tree of life that's there. Put that engraving on and then cut it out. The nice thing is there is no soot on this. I have not cleaned up either of these edges, and I'm not getting any of that black marking that I normally would with this. So now, another material that we use a lot in our lasers, of course, is acrylics, and the black acrylic especially, because you can get some nice engravings. Now, I've ran two different ones here. We've got a vector engraving of my logo here. This took about 49 seconds to do, and it's just around 2 inches square. So it's very quick, but a very nice contrast, very crisp detail on that due to that fine spot size. But then what's really impressive also is this cat image. Now, this is shrunken down a little bit, so we've lost a little bit of quality there, but the overall quality of that engraving, again, this is about 2 inches square, and that took about 2 minutes to work out. I was very impressed with both the quality and the fact that the settings were pretty close. This one might be just a little blown out in the white, so that could be a little bit on me for the photo prep, but really cool to see the brilliant contrast and the fine detail on both of these. Now, I'm not sure if I had settings right or not, but I did try to do some acrylic. Again, playing with that tree of life here, a very nice contrast on this item. And I ran a number of passes trying to cut it out, trying different settings, turning wobble on or off. And I did eventually get through it, but you kind of see that there's a bit of that kind of white marking on there. I feel like maybe because of the fine spot of the beam, it was getting through it, but the nature of acrylic is if you can't clean cut through, it's gonna kind of melt and then re-solidify. So I think I was fighting that. This is something I'm gonna need to play around a little bit more with, see if I can get some settings on, or it might just be a limitation of this laser that it can kind of do it, but cutting might be a little bit limited in acrylics. Continuing with the plastic theme, I did have this food container here and thought it'd be kind of funny to put a saying on there. I only bought one. I should have bought more than that for some testing, but I had a similar lid here. And so I did run some tests on there, and I was able to get that to kind of come out. You kind of see the test markings there. As a matter of fact, if I put something dark behind there you go. You can kind of see those test markings came out pretty well. Not as brilliant white. There's a little bit of dirtiness in there, but I thought it was okay to go with. So I went ahead and tried those settings on this lid, and it did engrave, but it was a little messy. The detail is there, but it did actually kind of raise the plastic a little bit. It kind of was, it just looks dirty. So I think I need to do a little more testing with that. The clear items are a little more tricky than the opaque ones, but it does interact with them. You do need to play with getting your focus right on that, and then playing with that frequency and the Q pulse really help dial in on some of these clear ones. But it is possible, and this is not necessarily indicative that this doesn't do it well. It just means I need to do a little more playing with the settings and figure out what will work well for this. Another common medium that I use in the laser, but has some negative effects to it, is leather. If you've ever engraved leather on your laser, you know what I'm talking about. You want to have good exhaust with that because the smell is pretty bad. Well, this one being a cold burn works pretty well on some leather. So this is 2mm leather. It is veg tan leather, and got a fairly decent contrast on there. Again, I was using some of the stock settings. I think if I played around a little bit more, I might be able to get different gradients. But then also the edge is nice and clean. It's not like overly burnt. Actually just kind of looks more like it's burnished. But then I also used a couple of synthetics. So here is one example of a synthetic. The contrast wasn't as great with that one, but it is still there. Quality's there, and it cut very cleanly. And then this is an example of some kind of synthetic leather, like the leatherette, where it has kind of the two-tone. This worked out very well, cut very cleanly. There's no crispy or burnt edges around the sides. So again, that cold burning laser, even on cutting, is going to give you a nicer edge to work with and not have any of that charring or rough edges that you might get with other lasers. Playing around with some synthetics, they did include some felt, and so went ahead and ran this test. This is like a Celtic circle on some felt, and did a nice job engraving. You can see that on the back side it hasn't really burned through or anything, but did leave that nice engrave on the top, and then did the nice cut around the edges. Again, they're not like they're burnt, and there's not really any like rough spots to them, just a very clean edge on that. So if you're wanting to play around with some fabrics and some synthetics, definitely doable both in engraving and cutting. Following that up, this is kind of a little more unique one. I've seen some people play around with fabrics with their lasers, and they kind of get some settings, but it tends to often degrade the material a little bit. Well, this one does have a setting for cotton, and so I tried it on a couple different things. This is just a simple oven mitt that I picked up from Dollar Tree, and the $1.25 is a real simple, inexpensive test, but it's 100% cotton, and it did a really great job putting this engraving on here. The fabric is still very much intact. It's not crispy. It's not fragile. It doesn't feel like it's going to rip. It seems still flexible, and so it looks great. You can definitely customize these and have some fun with that. So that worked out very well, just kind of removing the dye. So of course, figured we'd try some denim. And so went ahead and engraved a cat on the back of this pair of jeans. And so these are actually a denim, a kind of a blend. It's actually like a bit of a flexible blend. And so you can kind of see, we can we can flex that material, it's not tearing. And if I turn the pocket inside out, you're not seeing any damage on the inside. So it's done a really nice job creating a custom logo on there. You could do something maybe on the belt loop or something for branding. You could weather jeans, you could add things to the cuffs. Definitely works pretty well without seeming to damage the material. So that's definitely something I haven't done with any of my other lasers, because it usually tends to burn too hot and prematurely destroys the fabric. So just another thing that I can add if someone comes to me with a need. One of the common things we play around with our lasers is with some metals, and of course the aluminum business cards tend to be very popular. This one worked pretty well. I was able to get a very nice white engraving. I know if I play with the settings, I could probably dial this back and just get it down to bare aluminum. But on these black cards, I really like that white contrast on there. So this came out very well and very clean. I also played around with a couple of painted dog tags, and so wanted to see the detail. Well, here we go. We got my friend David over the Clack Shack went ahead and engraved his face on a dog tag there. And I think the quality is really nice. And this is using the 150 millimeter lens as opposed to the 70. With the 70, you could even get that dot pixel down even smaller. And the beautiful thing about this is it still only took about a minute to burn that engraving on there. So still fairly quickly. And then also went ahead and, you know, the inner geek in me had that Star Wars Stormtrooper selfie. Again, came out very, very nice, very, very clean and crisp on there. And so wanting to do some customization on dog tags, anodized aluminum, painted aluminum, does work very well. Keeping with our metal theme, went ahead with one of the stainless steel dog tags. Now this one's much more polished, so reflective, but went ahead and used a vector for the text as well as an image for the dog there. And this is a dog I used to have. He's a Siberian Husky named Dakota. And I had a pretty good picture of him, so tried that on there. Came out pretty well, depending, of course, on the angle. It looks either kind of brownish or you get some more detail in it. Probably would be better if I enlarged it a bit. But again, this is something that does also interact with bare metal. And so we're just looking at all that wide spectrum that this single laser can do. And one more thing with the metal theme, not only can it engrave, but it can also cut. So this is just a thin aluminum can here. Went ahead and engraved the paint away and then cut out. This was about 14 passes. I'll try to have the settings down below as well, but this came out fairly clean and crisp. It's not like a jagged edge, but of course being thin aluminum, it could do some damage, but a very nice clean cut, fairly simple. So on thin metals like this, definitely have some cutting ability as well as engraving. Another popular thing with lasers is of course stone and especially slate coasters. So ran a couple different tests. This was with some of the default settings. They had this set up, I think at like 9 passes, and this did do some ablating. It's down probably like, I don't know, 0.2 millimeters or so. This is after about half an hour. So if you kept running it, I have a feeling it would continue to dig down a bit. So if you're looking for depth, possibly some minor 2.5D, almost 3D effects, you can do that. But also just straight engraving off of slate. This is natural slate. I have not sanded it. I have not sealed it or anything. And it's getting a pretty decent contrast on there. So you know, that's one thing I've played with other lasers on trying to get that high contrast. I know some people don't like to seal their coasters because they still want them to have a slight absorption capability. So it is nice to see that there is a bit of contrast with this without necessarily having to treat it. But I can imagine by treating this, that's really gonna pop and look even better. Now this test was one of those where I probably should have done some more material testing before running this. But this is a kind of a stoneware, almost ceramic plate. And I ran it and did a number of passes, and you can kind of see that it did etch, and it was maybe taking the glaze away a little bit. This isn't very deep at all. So it did mark on it, but I think with this material, I need to do a little more research on it and see maybe I need to work with the settings. So perhaps one of the most popular reasons people get into the UV lasers is their natural ability to engrave on glass, but more of do the sandblasted effect, the etched look. without the fracturing and the possible cracking that you might get with a CO2 or even with painted material on diode. So ran a couple of tests on this just sheet glass, and you can see the top there was my initial test, and then of course that Tree of Life there. Was very happy with the results. Came out very clean. You can feel it, but it's not sharp, and there's not like a big dip or divot. But I think, and I've seen other videos where people have done multiple passes where they actually ablate down through the glass and almost cut it. So you are going to remove a little bit depending on your settings, but it is very smooth, very clean. It has more of that frosted feel than kind of the rough feel you can get with some items. So of course I ran another one. This is just a kind of a sealable jar. Picked this up at Dollar Tree, and this one has a slight curve to it. So I had to run it a couple extra passes just to make sure we got everything. And this one you can feel is just a little bit deeper, but still it's frosted. It's not fractured. It's not sharp. It's just a fairly clean looking engrave. And this is zero treatment on here. I didn't even clean it with any alcohol or anything. And so that is just straight from the laser onto here. Another unique property of this one being a cold cutting laser is working with very delicate materials such as paper. I went ahead and cut out some snowflakes. This is just single pass on here. Cut out very quickly, very cleanly. But if you're doing some paper crafts and needed some very clean, crisp, but accurate cuts, you know, this would take a very long time with like an X-Acto knife and things like that. Whereas this is very quick and easily done. This is just standard copier paper, and there's no scorching, there's no sign of burning on this whatsoever. So very cool aspect of this laser and how versatile it is. Then of course, just for fun, you can mark food. So went ahead and engraved this orange. Kind of engraved just the top part of the zest of that orange. So you can see it says this is an orange, and thought, what else can we do? So I did throw a banana on there, and hopefully you can see from the footage, it did engrave, but you couldn't see it right away. But shortly after that, it got darker, and this is a few days later, it is really darkened up where the banana engraving is. About 10 minutes afterwards, just the banana part was darkened. So if you're gonna do this, it's probably gonna be kind of funny for about an hour, but it's gonna quickly bruise your banana over time. So not something that you're gonna wanna leave out for a while. So I think this is where I wanna wrap this up. Hopefully that gave you a bit of an overview of what is possible with this. I was really impressed with the ability of this laser to engrave multiple materials, do it fairly cleanly without as much residue. It is going to be a little bit limited, I think, in its cutting ability for some materials. So if you're doing a lot of engraving and maybe some limited cutting on certain materials, this is a great machine for that. It gives you a wide gamut of options without having to worry about types of materials. Can this laser do it? It seems to have an effect on most anything I've thrown at it. I do need to do some more testing and playing with some settings on a variety of things. So some of these things that I was more interested in, we're probably gonna do some follow-up projects on that. So if that's something that's interesting to you, stay tuned, look forward to that. Maybe if you're new here, consider subscribing. If you have any questions or comments about this laser, something that maybe I breezed over, didn't touch on, or something you'd like to see, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of that. Always love that interaction. It helps me develop future videos. Of course, I want to thank ComMarker. They did send this unit out for me to review and take a look at. And so thanks to them for me being able to give you this content. And I will have links down below if you're interested in checking out more about this laser. Go ahead and use those, and using those also should get you a 5% off discount on your order. So I do get a slight kickback from that. Also tells them that I helped you make the decision on this laser. So always appreciate that, but as always, no pressure, just happy to give this information out to you. So anyway, thanks again for watching. I hope you found this informational, or at least entertaining, and worth your time. But most importantly, I hope you can get out into your workshop and make something too. We'll catch you next time.